Okay, hey guys, I realized I've never made a video talking about what the subconscious cues that I use to type people what they actually are. I think I made a Science of Personality Types video. In that video, I talked about how I sorted people into groups according to their subconscious cues, and then, based on the groups, I was observing patterns within the groups, but I never actually talked about what the subconscious cues actually are. And I think that because of that, there's a lot of misunderstandings that I hope to straighten out with this video. And yeah, a lot of the misunderstandings are like my fault or whatever. Okay, so one of the things is, and this is just one YouTube comment, but I think it encapsulates some sort of sentiment. But he said that like my system reminds him of phrenology, which I had to actually look up, and that's back in the day, it's a racist thing, back in the day when people used to measure people's like skull shape, and then they would use that to say like which people are more intelligent or whatever. So yeah, that's, if you haven't noticed, that's not really something I agree with. So there's a lot of differences. So that's more about physical features, and that's not really changeable. Like you don't change the size of your skull unless you're in a really bad situation. What we're talking about here with the subconscious cues, they're all movement styles. So they're speech styles, which no one has any issues with speech styles because we all type people based on talking anyway. For the visual styles, that's where people kind of get it confused with physical features, but they're actually movement styles that you can see by looking at someone, basically. And we have 3 movement styles with the smiling, the eye movements. So not the eye shape or the brow shape. I see this on some other YouTube channels, by the way, like the eyebrow slant, whether it's slanting up or down. So we're not doing any of those. Or, if the eyes are like downturned or upturned, it's none of that. It's literally like the iris of your eye moving around in its socket, like how that style of movement is. And then the smile being like the muscle movement in different directions when you're smiling. And then the body movements being, whether your movements are more sharp and jerky and controlled or not so much. So yeah, it's only those 3 things. Has nothing to do with physical features. I've seen that sometimes, like people talk about the shape of the chin. It's literally none of those things. It's only the 3 things that I said.
Even if someone gets plastic surgery, their subconscious cues don't change.
Yeah.
Except for maybe the smile, because Botox
well,
is a thing.
Okay, yeah, maybe Botox would be a thing, but even if you get plastic surgery, if you change your physical features, your movements are still not going to change.
Is there Botox for eyes?
No, there's Botox, but that's the thing. Okay, Alan's like doing the camera, and he's like just talk. I don't even know if your voice is getting picked up, but yeah, Botox for eyes, that doesn't change anything because you can fill in the wrinkles and change your eye shape, but your eyeball movement is still the same. So unless you can cement glue your eyeballs to the inside of your eyelid, which no one would do because that's insane, it's going to be fine. It's not going to affect the movement. Okay.
Prosthetic eyes then.
Prosthetic eyes is not gonna, I'm not gonna be able to tell someone's eye movement if they have prosthetic eyes. Okay, moving on. The other thing, and this is mainly my fault, micro expressions. So we have this video called Why Do We Type Via Micro Expressions that me and Alex made. Okay, micro expressions are cool, it's fine, but it's a misnomer. So what we're looking at is actually not micro expressions. Back then, we didn't really think too hard about what to term these things. Anyway, a micro expression, I think that originates from Paul Ekman. It's an expression that occurs in like a split second, and it tells you something about someone's true feelings. So for example, I could be pretending to be happy to see you, like smiling, but then in the middle of my smile, there's gonna be like a little cringe or a look away or a cringe that betrays my true feelings of like maybe I'm uncomfortable or maybe I'm lying. That's something that happens for a split second. So it's kind of nice because the split second nature of the thing it corresponds with a fleeting state, right? So if I'm upset and that shows on my face for a split second, it doesn't mean that I'm an upset person. It just meant that I was upset in that very moment that I did that micro expression. However, we're not doing that for the subconscious cues. It's actually something constant whenever you're performing it. So it's a constant pattern or a consistent pattern. So it doesn't happen for a split second. It happens every time you're doing something. For example, I'm moving my hands right now and I'm doing the fluid body movement pattern. So yeah, if I'm not moving at all, then I guess you can't really tell. But the point is, every time I move, it's that pattern. It's not like just a split second. It's just the whole time that I'm moving, I'm displaying that subconscious cue, which is the fluid body movement style. And the constancy of this, like that whenever you're performing something, like whenever I'm smiling, I'm doing the FI buoyant smile, that corresponds with a constant state within me. So the kind of functions and the kind of type being the more constant state. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about what the subconscious cues actually are, since I talked about what they're not. Okay, so by subconscious, I mean that they are unintentional. So they're outside of conscious or voluntary control for the most part. So I'm not really consciously thinking about how I'm moving. Well, I guess now I am. But even if you're consciously thinking about it, you can't really override these patterns of movement.
Like even when I'm trying to be fluid, you still say I'm really jerky. Rude.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Like, I could voluntarily try to be jerky, but after just acting that particular time, it's gonna go back to my natural state. So I think for the body movements, maybe if you're an actor, you can do it for some time, but it's gonna be really difficult. You see, I'm trying to do it, but I still can't really keep it up. With the eye movements, there's been scientific proof that some people just cannot do certain eye movements without visual stimulus. For example, with the smooth pursuit eye movement that I associate with NE, there's actually a study about it showing that some people can do that movement without any physical object. So if I have a finger, then anyone can do that movement, but only some people can do it without the object. And by cue, I mean a sign or a clue in the external world that's externally observable or universally observable. Like we can all gather in a group and look at people and be like, oh, look at that cue or look at that external display. These cues, as said before, they can be visual or auditory. So far, I found 7, but it doesn't have to be 7. There's probably more, but that's just the ones I found so far. The 3 visual cues, as previously talked about, and there's 4 auditory cues. Auditory cues are patterns in the speech. So it's not what you say, but it's how you say it, and just various verbal and vocal patterns in the speech. So even though these subconscious cues are externally observable, so far they're still being observed by humans, and human error is always possible. So even though it's a more objective system, you can still make mistakes in reading the subconscious cues. The cool part, though, about all of this, and why I really, really want to stick with it forever and develop it more and more, is that the visual and the auditory cues, they often coincide, or they seem to almost always coincide. It's not just even in people, but in the timing, which is really mind-blowing. Okay, so for example, people who have the fluid body movement, as I've previously said, so I have fluid body movement, and I also have improvisational speech. So my speech is more like a stream of consciousness rather than something more prepared or structured or essay-like. And I've seen that pretty much everyone who has this kind of fluid body movement, they also have the improvisational speech. So the visual patterns and the auditory patterns are always coinciding, which I think is a pretty decent justification for why this whole thing might be legit. Okay, so it's coinciding in the people and that you can't find someone who has a really structured speech, who has fluid body movements all over the place. So if you have predominantly improvisational speech, you're going to have predominantly fluid body movements, but everyone has, I think, seen me go like this or whatever at some point. So at those points, I tend to be making a point. So sometimes when on the rare occasion that I have structured something in my mind and I'm saying it out loud, that's when it's going to coincide with more rigid body language. And I'm constantly seeing, just timing wise in judges that their speech is generally really structured and their body movement is rigid. However, sometimes when they get distracted by external thing that they've perceived, their, external perception picks up and their speech becomes a little bit more messy. And during the moment that happens, their body movement get a little bit more messy and sporadic as well. Okay, so that's about it for this video. I hope that clears up some things about the empirical personality typing process. If you would like to learn more about the subconscious cues, I do have an online course available. And so far, I'm constantly adding to it, but so far the subconscious cues library has over 600 video clips. So you can really look at each cue and learn how to identify the cue in others and link it to their internal kind of functions. And that can be found on my website, empiricalpersonality.com. My cat's like, meow. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.